Hello there, this is Kadir. In this video, I'll walk you through different stages of IELTS listening exam, all the necessary information with lots of great tips that will help you to be successful and improve your bound score. Let's jump into it. First of all, the IELTS listening exam is exactly the same for both types, academic and general training. Same format, same recordings, and same scoring. Let's take a look at the content of the exam. There are 4 parts of the exam, part 1, 2, 3, and 4, which means there will be 4 recordings for each part. Total number of questions will be 40, and the time will be 30 minutes, with 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. First 2 parts are the easiest. It's probably because they're about social situations, everyday situations. The last 2 parts, as some of my students say, are the most challenging just because their content is more academic in its nature. What makes these parts easy and difficult? Let's talk more about them in more detail. Part 1 recording is about social topics and will have 2 speakers talking about social situations like booking a room in a hotel, opening a bank account, or making some travel arrangements. So they need your name, address, date, time, etc. So you need to listen for all this kind of specific information. Part 2 recording is also about social topics and will only have 1 speaker talking. You might hear other people speaking as well, but the main speaker is going to be only 1 person giving information about everyday social topics, such as tour of historic building, a museum, local facilities of an organization. It could be a charity or a company, anything that's local. Part 3 recording is different in its context from the first 2 recordings, as it will have more academic content in it and will have 3 and 4 people talking. It could be a teacher, a professor, and a student discussing an assignment. What makes part 3 difficult is the fact that it could be hard to know which is saying what, especially when you listen to 3 or 4 different voices. Part 4 recording, like part 3, is academic, but will have only 1 speaker, and it'll be an academic lecture. That's why it's most challenging part of IELTS listening exam. The lecture might be about wildlife, nature, pollution, technology, invention, and so on. But how can you successfully get higher scores on your IELTS listening exam? So here are some tips. Tip number 1. My first tip, listening for all these 4 parts will just be played only once and it won't be played again. So you are listening, reading and writing, all doing at the same time. That's why you need to train yourself for that. So do a lot of practice. There are so many free online IELTS practice tests that you can use to train yourself for that multitasking. The best way to do it is to practice all the listening parts using the answer sheet that will be used in the IELTS exam to make you feel more comfortable during the actual listening exam. Tip 2. My next tip is get used to British accent. Yes, we know IELTS is an international exam and you will hear all kinds of English accents such as British, American, Australian, New Zealand, or even South African. But for the most part, you will hear British accent. Therefore, start watching British TV and movies. Also practice pronunciation of letters and numbers in different accents because often letters are spelled out and numbers read out by a speaker in a test. For example, a 0 can be pronounced as O, like my house number is 407 instead of 407. My next tip, number 3, is decide what you want to use, either capital letters or lowercase, when you write your answers on the answer sheet. And don't mix both capitals and lowercase letters in different answers. If you decide to use lowercase for your answers throughout, please don't forget to capitalize proper nouns. I mean names for people, places. And for example, Mr. Tom should have M capital for Mr. and T capital for Tom. Tip number 4, don't be scared to take notes on your question paper, because you can write on it, as examiners are probably never going to see it. They only mark your answer sheets. But please, while you're taking notes, don't worry about spellings and take only short notes. For example, if you hear a speaker saying Canadian passport as an answer to a question during your listening exam, you can write C and D for Canadian and PSPT or PSSPT for passport as notes to help you stay focused on the listening. Don't waste your time writing the words in full with correct spelling. Just take your notes and don't worry about spellings yet. You will be given 10 minutes at the end of your listening exam to transfer all of your answers, and this is the time when you have to write the correct spelling, not on the question paper while you're taking your listening notes. Tip number 5. My next tip is probably the most important one, which is read the instructions of every part very carefully. If they tell you to answer in only 2 words, it means 2 words. A 3-word correct answer is going to get you a 0. For example, if you have the instruction which says write 1 word and or a number for each answer, it means your answer can be either in 1 word or 1 number as an answer, or a combination of both, which means a word and a number can be as answer. But you cannot write 2 words or 2 numbers. If you do, you might get a 0 because you're simply not following the instructions. And the worst part is the instruction may change for the next questions, where they might ask you to write no more than 2 words or 3 words. So read the instruction very carefully for each part, and I would suggest underlining the number of the word in each instruction to help you stay on the track. Another important point of following the instruction is, if the instruction of a question asks you to choose a letter as an answer, just choose the letter of the correct answer. Never write the answer in words. For example, choose the correct answer A, B or C, and after the listening, if you see these questions like how many bags are allowed on the plane, A 3, B 4, C 6. If the correct answer is B, you must write letter B. Do not write 4 as an answer, which is a word. So you will get a 0 because you're simply not following the instructions carefully. Tip number 6 is about time management. You'll be given only 30 seconds at the end of each section to check your answers, and then after that you'll be asked to turn over and look at the next section for another 30 seconds to read the questions before starting the listening of the next section. My tip for you here is that you combine these 30 seconds into 1 minute. After each listening, do not waste your 30 seconds checking the answers of the first listening, because the recording of that section will never be played for you again, and therefore you will not be able to confirm or check any kind of answers at this point. So why waste this precious time? Instead, go straight to the next listening section and start reading the questions. That way you will have 30 seconds after the first listening plus 30 seconds before you start the second listening, and that will give you 1 minute to look through the questions of the next section. If you spend 1 minute going through the question, you will understand them better and will be more focused on your listening, which means increasing the chances of your correct answers. Next, tip 7. Since now you have 1 minute to go through the questions of the next section, and you can also write anything on your question paper, I would suggest you underline the keywords in the questions. While you're reading the question, before the listening starts, underline or circle the most important information in the questions. Let me give you an example. Sarah moves to France, meets Kevin, who thinks he'll never be able to do something. In this sentence, I would underline the name Kevin, never, and to, because the focus of the question is on Kevin, not Sarah. He's the one who's not going to do something in France. I would also remember to focus on the word never. And I can easily guess that after the preposition to in the sentence here, it's either going to be a verb, well, it's not going to be a noun or an adjective or an adverb. So you see, underlining the keywords in a question is really going to help you to stay focused on listening. Tip number 8. Look at the two questions at the same time. While you're listening, answers keep coming and they can come really quickly. You might get 3 answers in just one go. And if you just keep looking at only one question at a time, you may miss information for other questions. So always keep an eye on the next question. Tip number 9. Check where all the questions are. If the listening said answer questions from 1 to 7 and you see only 1 to 6 questions on the first page, make sure you answer the question 7 on the next page. Tip number 10. Don't panic if you miss an answer. Just move on. If you feel that you have missed 1 or 2 answers or heard some words that you can't understand, don't worry. Just concentrate on the next ones. You can't do anything about it. As you know, the recording is never going to be played again. So my tip at this point here is that you can try to guess the answer at the end of the exam when you will have 10 minutes to transfer your answer. That's the only thing you can do. Tip number 11. Learn different types of questions. And that's really important because during the listening exam, you will only have time to read, listen, and write your answers. You will not have enough time to figure out what to do or how to answer different types of questions. Why not prepare for them beforehand? The only way to do this is you can practice, and most importantly, you can develop some strategies how to answer these kind of questions. These different kinds of questions could be like multiple choice questions, matching, plan, map, diagram, labeling, form, note, table, flowchart, summary clip, completion, sentence completion, short answer questions. So there is a whole bunch of different kinds of questions. And my next tip is do not fall into this trap. This trap is as soon as students listen to the needed information, they take information as correct answer and write it down. But hold on, sometimes this information is repeated and corrected further down in the listening. For example, if someone says, let's meet at 10 a.m. for a cup of coffee, the person says, okay, sounds good, but hang on a second, I might get late because of the traffic on the road. Then how about 10:30 instead? You see, in this dialogue, the time has been changed from 10 to 10:30. So be patient and keep listening. My next tip is listen for plurals. IELTS knows that most of the English language learners have hard time catching the plurals on their listening exam. So you need to listen very carefully if there is a plural sound with the words or not. For sentence completion, it's quite easy because you can read the sentence and decide if the missing word is singular or plural. For all other questions, you really need to listen very carefully. Now, after these 4 sections of listening, you will have 10 minutes to transfer your answers. I have some tip for you for these 10 minutes as well. The first tip, transfer your answers carefully. If you put correct answers in the wrong place on the answer sheet, it's going to be wrong. So make sure you put the answers in the correct place. And this can happen if you left an answer blank on the question paper. You may then fill that one in with the wrong answer when you transfer them across. So be careful when you transfer the answers to the answer sheet. Next tip is the spelling and the grammar. While transferring the answer on the answer sheet, please pay special attention to spellings and grammar. Do you remember in one of my tips earlier, I mentioned that while you're taking notes, you don't have to worry about your spellings and grammar. Now is the time to be very careful with your spellings and grammar. Most of the time, my students ask me, teacher, what kind of spellings we should write? And well, it doesn't matter as long as your spellings are correct in either American or British English. For example, the word center, C-E-N-T-E-R or C-E-N-T-R-E is correct either way. So as long as you have correct spelling, you should not worry about it. And the last tip is, do not leave answers blank. If you do not write answers to some questions while listening was in progress, just because you could not catch some information because of some difficult vocabulary or it was too fast for you, never ever leave an empty space on the answer sheet. Always make a good guess. You will not lose any scores for writing wrong answers because there is no negative marking in IELTS. If you want to learn more about pronunciation tips or native English accents, which will help you with your IELTS listening exam as well, please watch my other videos on my channel or click the links above. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments box below. Keep watching my channels for more videos on useful IELTS tips for reading, writing and speaking exam. Good luck with your prep for IELTS, and I'll see you in my next video. Cheers!